All right, ladies and gentlemen, this is going to be our last lecture of this chapter, and we're going to go ahead and tie together a lot of different concepts that we learned previously in the chapter and learn about what homeostasis is and how our cells help an organism maintain homeostasis. So first off, let's go ahead and look at just what homeostasis is. When we look at what homeostasis is, it's really just a way that we keep a relatively constant, stable environment within an organism. So it's when we're looking at an internal physical and chemical environment of that organism, we're making sure that it's remaining stable. So things like the organism's body temperature, the organism's amount of water, their blood sugar. We're wanting to keep those different aspects of an organism very stable. We don't want things to get too high, too low. You guys know that it's not good if you get too hot, if you get overheated. You know that it's also not good if you get too cold. So we do things in our body to go ahead and help maintain a more constant body temperature. So when we look at homeostasis, it's really just keeping all of those different levels in a stable range. And if our body goes out of that range, we're going to have things react a certain way. We're going to have organs doing different jobs to go ahead and get back to that stable level. Now, when we look at fighting disease, okay, this is a perfect example. Our immune system, when our immune system discovers that there's something in our body that's not supposed to be there, like a microorganism, bacteria, a virus, the immune system wants to attack those invaders. And it wants to restore homeostasis because realistically, if we have something that's in our body that isn't supposed to be there, it could be possibly taking oxygen away. It could be taking nutrients away from the cells of that organism that need it in order to keep that organism healthy and living. So if we see something foreign, our immune system is going to attack it. Just like you see here, these white blood cells are attacking this parasite and trying to go ahead and kill it. You guys learned a couple chapters ago, parasites live within a host and steal the nutrients away. So we don't want something that is foreign, bacteria, virus, a parasite, going into an organism and stealing those nutrients away. So our body's going to attack it to go ahead and hopefully restore homeostasis so that organism does not get sick or diseased from whatever it is that is inside of that body. Now, another perfect example of homeostasis is temperature control. So for a body or for an organism, okay, they have to remain a consistent temperature in order to remain healthy. If a temperature of an organism gets too cold, muscles don't function well. So they're going to have a slow reaction time. They're not going to be able to move as quick as they should. So that could put them in danger. Also, if their body gets too hot, okay, they could easily tire out too quickly. We know that if we get too hot, we could go ahead and have our body stressed too much and we could have heat exhaustion and get really sick from that. Okay, so our body needs to do things in order to maintain a more stable environment. So our body is going to go ahead and look at having a source of heat. And then we need to go ahead and have a way to conserve that heat. Think of like insulation in a house. We need to be able to conserve that heat and hold that heat in if it's a colder temperature in our environment. And then we also need a method of eliminating too much heat. So when our environment has an excess amount of heat, we need to make sure that as an organism, our body can release that excessive heat so that it doesn't get too warm and cause sickness for that organism. So the body is all about trying to control and keeping it within a stable, consistent range that is healthy for that organism. So the body is going to be doing different things to go ahead and help control that body temperature. Okay, you know that we are going to go ahead and start sweating to help eliminate excess heat. We shiver to try to go ahead and produce more heat if we get too cold. So there's things that we know ourselves do to go ahead and help control our body temperature. Now, there's two types of organisms. You guys are more commonly used to hearing them as warm-blooded or cold-blooded. Okay, we're going to go ahead and look at both of them. And the first one we're going to look at are what are called ectotherms. Ectotherms are mainly going to be regulating their body temperature through the source of heat outside of their bodies, meaning the environment. So they're going to go ahead and be using the environment to go ahead and help regulate their body temperature. Okay. They do require less food because they don't need as much energy from that food to go ahead and help regulate their temperature, because really they're going to be using the outside environment to do it. Also, a big thing though is it's going to take a long time for an animal to go ahead and warm up in the sun so that they can move quick enough and so that their muscles can function properly. So that's definitely something to think about when you think about, a predator and a prey situation, that if that organism is prey and it hasn't been able to warm up yet because the environment is too cold, or they haven't been able to lay in the sun long enough to warm up, they may not be able to get away from a predator and may easily be hunted. Okay, so it's something definitely to go ahead and think about. Ectotherms, a perfect example are these guys here. A lot of reptiles, lizards, snakes, they are ectotherms. So you will see a lot of lizards in the morning. They will actually be laying out like on rocks, and they're kind of basking in the sun, and they're taking in that warmth from the sun to warm their body up. Because again, they don't have a system within their body to go ahead and be able to warm their muscles up. They have to use their environment. A good way to go ahead and think about it in our lives is think about a house that has no air conditioning and no heating system. Okay, the temperature of that house is solely going to be based on the environment outside. So imagine if we had a house here in our area, imagine right now if it had no heating system. Okay, it would be very, very, very cold. Okay, it would have a hard time warming up. And think how cold that house would get in the evening when the sun is down. Okay, and then think how that house would warm up a little bit once the sun came out and the sun could come through the windows. The warmth of that sun might warm that house up a little bit. Okay, same thing in the summer. Think about how hot a house would be if it doesn't have air conditioning to run. Okay, it's not going to be able to cool that house down properly because there's no central air conditioning. Ectotherms work very much the same way. Their temperature is solely based on the environment's temperature. Now, endotherms, which are ourselves, they are going to have a really high metabolic rate that is able to generate heat itself. So endotherms, they're able to go ahead and do things within their bodies that are going to help hold a consistent temperature despite what the outside environment is. Okay, and our bodies are going to react certain ways to either release excessive heat or to conserve excessive heat, depending on the outside environment. So when we look at endotherms, they're going to be able to generate body heat. They're going to be able to conserve body heat when needed. And because of this, because it is a high metabolic rate, in order to do this, it requires a lot of fuel, which is our food, okay, which is why we have to consume a lot more food than ectotherms do. They need to go ahead and use that food. We need to use that food in order to generate that heat and be able to conserve that heat or release it when needed. Okay, endotherms, again, think about in the summer when we're overheating, we're going to have a system that helps us release that. Okay, we go ahead and sweat. You might go ahead and see how dogs, when they pant, they are actually releasing excessive heat. That way, that is their version of sweating, how they release excessive heat. And then in the cold weather, we're going to be shivering. Okay, us shivering allows our muscles to actually generate excessive heat and conserve that heat to warm our body up so that our muscles don't get too cold and our body temperature doesn't lower. So endotherms, we're able to go ahead and regulate a consistent body temperature despite whatever the outside environment is. And we have systems in place that help us regulate that body temperature when it's either too warm or too hot in the environment. All right, now looking at living organisms, okay, how we maintain homeostasis based on the type of organism we are. So there's two types of living organisms. There are unicellular organisms, and think about that prefix uni. Okay, a unicycle is only one wheel. A unicellular organism is an organism made up of only one cell. Versus a multicellular organism. Okay, the prefix multi means many. So anything that is a multicellular organism is going to be an organism made up of multiple cells. So how those organisms go ahead and maintain homeostasis, maintain a stable environment is going to be very different. Okay, unicellular organisms, they're going to go ahead and respond to the environment as needed because they are just one single cell. So just that single cell is going to be growing and responding to the environment as needed to maintain homeostasis. Multicellular becomes much more complex. So multicellular organisms, they are going to become specialized for certain jobs or tasks, and they're going to communicate with each other in order to maintain homeostasis. So multicellular organisms, much more complex. All those different cells that are making up that organism are going to work together to maintain homeostasis, and each cell in that organism is going to have a specific task to do. Okay, it's very much when you think about like a football team or a baseball team or a basketball team, they work together to achieve one goal. Everybody has a certain task, and they need to go ahead and achieve that task in order for the goal of the team to be maintained. So if we want to win a game, we need to make sure that our pitcher is doing its job, our catcher is doing its job, our first baseman, our second baseman is doing their job. So everybody has a task, everybody knows what they need to do when the ball is hit to them. But in order to maintain that, everybody has to communicate as well. Okay, so everybody's communicating and working together to go ahead and win that game and get that overall achievement. Same thing with a multicellular organism. They're working together, they're communicating to maintain homeostasis for that whole organism. Now, how that happens is multicellular organisms, their cells are going to become specialized. Okay, and they become specialized through a process called cell differentiation. Differentiation is where each cell becomes specialized or it gets assigned a task or a job in order to perform a different function from another cell within the organism. Okay, so every single cell gets assigned a job. So we have cells that are going to be making up our liver, and those cells that are making up that organ are going to have a very specific job so that the liver functions properly for that living organism. Same thing, the cells that are going to create our brain, those cells become specialized as a brain cell, and they have a different function or task than that of liver cells. They need to do what a brain cell needs to do to make sure that that organism's brain is working properly and helping maintain homeostasis for the whole organism. Okay, so all of these different types of cells, muscle cells, okay, our other parts of our nervous system, our neurons, our heart cells, our blood cells, all of these different cells that we have in our body are specialized to do a certain job, and they then come together as a whole to make that organism healthy and maintaining homeostasis. Now, when we look at two examples of specialized cells, okay, in plant cells, we have cells that are called guard cells. These actually are cells that are going to control the opening and closing of the stomata in our leaves. And the stomata are these little tiny holes or pores that are on the leaves that are going to open up, that are going to allow the release of oxygen that was made during photosynthesis. And it's also going to go ahead and allow taking in of CO2. If you guys remember in photosynthesis, we remember plants take in CO2. That is how they're going to take that CO2 in, through these tiny pores. So these cells, these guard cells, are very specialized to go ahead and allow to fill up with water or release water in order to open and close those holes to allow for that oxygen out and that CO2 in. Another perfect example is a nerve cell. Okay, you guys have nerve cells that are going to take a signal from our brain and it's going to send it out to going to send it out to where it needs to go. It has like a long little message kind of cord here that's going to send that message. It's very specialized and it looks a certain way so that it does the job that it needs to do in order to send messages out to the body. When we look at other cells, muscle cells, when we look at heart cells, liver cells, they don't look anything like a nerve cell. The way these nerve cells look is specific to their specialized job. All right, now how things come together to go ahead and work like that sports team to maintain homeostasis. We have different levels of organization that kind of come together and build on each other. So when we look, we're going to originally start with one single specialized cell. And that single specialized cell is going to join together with multiple of those same specialized cell to make a tissue. And then more tissues of that same specialized cells are going to join together to make an organ. And organs with that same function are going to join together to make a nervous system. Okay, so when we look, we're going to go ahead and take a single cell, okay, just that single basic unit of life. It's going to become specialized. And it's going to group together with other similar specialized cells that have the same job or function, and that's going to form a tissue. When groups of tissues with the same function or job come together, that becomes an organ. And when we have different organs that are all coming together to go ahead and perform a specific function, when those organs group together, we get an organ system. Okay, so when we look at that previous slide, okay, we have nerve cells. Those come together to make nerve tissue, which will come together to make our brain. And our brain is part of the nervous system. So our brain joins with our spinal cord, and that makes our nervous system. So cells join together to make tissues, tissues join together to make organs, and organs join together to make a system. Okay, so again, just to go ahead and give you a nice visual, how we build on that system, okay, we are able to go ahead and look at that cell to tissue to organ and to make that organism. And then we can even pull on things that we learned in this semester so far. If we look at just a single organism and then we look at similar organisms, okay, we can make a population. We can build on that to a community, into an ecosystem. So think about things we learned in previous chapters on how we can look at just an organism or build onto a bigger scale in that ecology unit. Okay, so that's how really we're going to go ahead and look at maintaining that sense of homeostasis, how those cells come together to work together and maintain those stable levels for an organism. All right, guys, that takes care of our homeostasis lecture. Make sure you've listened well and taken good notes. And as always, if you have questions, let me know in class. Have a good day.